Hi, everyone. Today we have Robin Meyerson. She is an international speaker, author, and life coach. The reason she's here today is I love spiritual stories, and I know you do too. So, Robin, can you tell us a wild story?
Sure. I'm so happy to be here with you from the city of Jerusalem on my back screen here. Um, I never really knew that there were all these things as coincidences and spiritual stories until they started happening to me. So I started keeping a journal as they were happening, and then more and more started happening. So it turned into a collection of short stories, and I've published several books as a result of them. And now it has led to so many wonderful things, including doing this interview with you. So I'm happy to be here today. The first story that I'm going to share is called it's a golf story. So for those of you who don't play golf, it's still going to be very interesting. This story happened about 23 years ago. I was driving down a certain street that has many golf courses along the side of the road. And I'd been driving down that street for literally, I don't know, 20 years. And I'd never been bothered by the golf courses at all. And I actually was driving down the street and I saw this white ball come and it hit me in the front of my windshield. And I mean, I saw it coming like in slow motion. And I happened to be 7 months pregnant at the time. And so I pulled over, the window was like completely shattered, and being pregnant and being hot where I live, I was, overwhelmed and emotional. So I called my husband and my brother and my father. I'm like, come rescue me because I got hit by this golf ball. So they all came, zooming over to rescue this damsel in distress. And we went over to the golf course and we sort of like demanded like sort of compensation. Like, how can this happen? How can a golf ball from your golf course, hit my daughter, my sister, my my wife's car? Look at her, she's pregnant. And the manager of the golf course said, I'm really sorry that happened to you, but it's really considered an act of God. There's nothing we can do about it. We can't control where the golf ball goes. So we were very like sort of dumbfounded when he said this. He's like, yeah, you can call your insurance company and have them fixed. There's nothing I can do about it. So I was like, oh, okay. So we left. I got my car fixed, and fine. 3 weeks later, I'm driving down the same road, and I see another ball coming at me. And this time I didn't freak out. This time I laughed because I saw it coming like in slow motion again. And it hit the windshield again. It was a different golf course on that same road. So I pulled over, I called my husband. My husband is an engineer, and he's a scientist. And I said, Charlie, you're not going to believe what happened to me. He's like, what? No, because he's very concerned because I was like pregnant with my first child, our first child. And I said, I was driving down Hayden Road and I got hit by a golf ball again. And he said, what? And he called all of his coworkers, all his other engineers that, work with him. And they started calculating the permutations and the statistical probability of this possibly happening to the same person on the same street within 3 weeks. And they concluded after all their mathematical computation that it was like 1 in a gazillion, 1 in a gazillion. And it was definitely an act of God. So that was my first experience with this whole sort of weird experience. And I wrote it down, but I also bought myself a present. I bought myself a little necklace in the shape of a little golf ball so that I could remember this experience and share it with others. And know that when things happen to you, it's for a reason. And that was my first lesson in knowing that things happen because God wanted them to happen. I didn't know the full message at that time, but I'm still learning it as I go along.
You know why that's so incredible, Robin? We've never talked about this, but I drive past a golf course every day, multiple times a day, to and from my house. And a few days ago, I was thinking, I've never been hit by a golf ball. I was just thinking that. We've never had it hit our car. And I've been there for 17 years. And guess what? I see golf balls on the road all the time.
Yeah,
so they are coming.
See them on the floor, on the ground all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to ask you about another story. And you've written books, right? So I want to ask you about books in a moment too, what books you've written and what the topics are. But we all call the wrong number from time to time. And I know you have a wild story about a wrong number dial. So I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, so we do. We dial wrong numbers, and it usually just results in a hang up. Sorry, I bothered you. No big deal. Wrong number. But a few years ago, my mother-in-law had wanted to make a trip to Scotland to trace her roots because her mother had come from there and she'd never been to Scotland, and she'd always heard these beautiful romantic stories about the beautiful green Scotland and the bagpipes and the rolling hills and the sheep, and she wanted to explore it. So my husband and I said, okay, great, we'll take you on a trip to Scotland with our little daughter. And so we booked the flight and the trip and everything. But before we did so, we hired a genealogist so that we could maybe trace some of her other relatives. Maybe there were some relatives that were still alive because her mother had come from there. But that was many, many years ago, and that we didn't know any of the relatives at all. So she had come over to America, I think in the 1915 or something like that. And she had died in the 50s. So it was a long time. And she didn't have any other relatives that we knew about. So we hired a genealogist, and the genealogist came back after a few months with a report of some people that were indeed my mother-in-law's second, maybe third cousins. So we gave this report, this printout to her, and it had phone numbers on it and addresses. So she proceeded to dial the first number on it, and the man answered the phone. His name was Duncan from Scotland. And she said, "Hi, I'm Vera, and my son and daughter-in-law are bringing me to Scotland to check out my roots. And I hear you're my cousin, and we hired this genealogist." And the guy on the other end, Duncan's like, "Lady, I'm not your cousin, but who are you trying to reach?" And so she said, "But wait, aren't you so-and-so?" And he goes, "No, I'm not so-and-so, but I know him. I play bowls with him. That's at lawn bowling." He plays. And so what's the odds of that, first of all, that she dials this wrong number? It's not her cousin. It's a guy, a stranger who knows her cousin. So that's the first thing. So instead of hanging up the phone at that point, he starts to engage in a conversation with my mother-in-law because she was such a personable person. And she says, "Well, they're coming, and we're arriving on this date." And then so Duncan says, "Look, why don't I pick you up at the airport, and I'll show you around, and I'll bring you to your cousins, and I'll even if you have a letter that you want to address to him, why don't you mail it to me, and I'll personally hand deliver it to him so that make sure he gets it." So this conversation that was a wrong number turned out to be a 45-minute conversation that he did indeed pick us up at the airport. He did indeed show us around Scotland, and he did introduce us to the cousins, and we met them. We had a fabulous time in Scotland. It was glorious, but the story gets more meaningful after this. So a few months after we got back to America, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And we had made such good friends with these wrong number people, Duncan and Margaret. Now it turns out they are elderly themselves. And Margaret, his wife, is a nurse. And she actually had also had a certain type of cancer that was very similar to my mother-in-law's. So this wrong number phone call turned into be a very important relationship, because through the 6 months of chemotherapy that my mother-in-law was going through, Margaret would call her every day. She would just wish her the best, just every single day, check in with her and see how she was doing. And then it gets even more meaningful. They decided, Margaret and Duncan, to save up their pennies. They were not a very rich couple at all. They decided to take 2 extra jobs and save up money to come to America and to use their vacation time to spend in America with my mother-in-law during her final months. And so they came to America, and it wasn't a typical vacation, like sightseeing and all that. They came and they lived with her. They nurtured her, they cared for her, changed her bandages, fed her. And so this wrong number turned out to be like little angels, and they flew across the sea and came to America and looked after my mother-in-law in her final months. So you never know. You never know what a wrong number can turn into. Beautiful, beautiful friendship.
Oh, that's incredible. That's amazing. Thank you for that story, Robin. I want to ask you in a moment. I know you had had a terrible car accident. You have a story with a physical therapist, but I just love these stories so much. And I think there are people who would want to read about it. So can I share some of your books? I'm going to try to do screen share. And if you can tell us, can you see the
Sure.
books?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. So I started out writing all these miracle story books, and then some of them turned into also miracle stories about the afterlife. So the book at the top left corner, it's a little like a blue, that one right there. It's called May the Neshama Have an Aliyah. That's a children's, or it's a teacher's book. It's a manual for teachers to teach about what you can do when you have lost a loved one, and it's age appropriate for kindergartners through 12th graders. Because I've had so many miracle stories about the afterlife and, you know, near-death experiences and things like that, I wrote that to give encouragement for teachers so that they could teach children in all different grades. Then the book to the top on the third book over, it's called I Lost Someone Special. That's a children's book that was illustrated just beautifully. And we actually just donated 100 of these books to the victim's family at Surfside in Florida. This book is called I Lost Someone Special. And it's a poetry book for typical children, 12 years old and younger, but a lot of adults love this book because it's just very warm and meaningful, and what you can do when you've lost a loved one. And then the book down below, which called From This World to the Next, it's the second book right there, perfect. That is a series of short stories, miracle stories about this world and the next, and they're just all like, they're not spooky, but some of them are a little spooky, and they're all available. You can get them at NASCK, NASCK.org, or you can call or text me at my cell phone number. I can give it to you right now. It's 602-469-1606. And there's quantity discounts, or if you want them just for yourselves. They're great gifts for people who have maybe lost someone, or even just you want to learn about the next world. You want to learn some interesting things about the other life, other world that we're going to go to, not for a long time, but soon. So thank you. Those are the books that, and I have other books, but those are the ones that are related to this. Oh, and up top, we have all these different resources that are available for people to remember their soul. Like there's brochures that are free. There's little pamphlets. The book Cremation or Burial, I had that published to help dispel the myths about cremation versus burial, and why burial is just such a gentle, loving, warm thing to do, and the cremation myths. So that's a great book that's perfect for people of all backgrounds and interests. Basically it's an adult book, but it's good for people of all ages and backgrounds. So, and the Remember My Soul, that's actually by Lori Palatnik, and it's a great book if you've lost someone, and what to do on a daily basis for a whole year. So really nice resources that are available for people, books and pamphlets, teachers manuals, all to teach about the next world and miracle stories.
Great. Oh, incredible books. Thanks for telling us about the website. And I'll put in the comments, I'll put your phone number, email, that website. And I know that people just love these amazing spiritual stories. So can you tell us about the car accident and the physical therapist?
Yeah, it's kind of related to the Scottish story. It's crazy, I was driving near my house. They say most accidents happen near your home. And so I was driving actually my husband's car. I usually would have had my own car, but I had to pick up another kid. So I used my husband's car, which was bigger. And it's a good thing that I did use that van that day, because I got into this accident. And it's crazy. I was driving down a street, and I approached an intersection with a stoplight. And as I saw the light, it's about to turn red, I saw this car jump the red. And I thought, oh, that's so crazy. But as I was going so fast, a second car jumped the red, and I couldn't avoid that car. So I was T-boned. My car was T-boned by this other car, the second car, who jumped the red light. And my car was literally smushed on the right side. So I, jumped out of my car like a superhuman powers, like flew in the sky across to the other side of the car, because my little 1-year-old was on the right side where the impact was, and my 3-year-old was behind me. Now, my little 1-year-old was still sleeping, even though the car was like smushed on that side. It was just like a miracle. So anyway, the ambulance comes, they take us all to the hospital. They put me down on one of those stretcher things where I can't move. And my 2 little ones are in the car with me, my 3-year-old and my 1-year-old. And we go to the hospital, and thank God I was fine. Like, I didn't have any broken bones, but I had a lot of physical therapy that I would need, because I was smashed up by the impact. Like, I kind of hit the steering wheel a little bit, and the way I was clutching things, it caused a lot of strain on my muscles. So I was told by the emergency doctors to call a physical therapist. So I got my insurance information out when I got home a few days later, and I called the first insurance company, and they were not on my, what I thought they were on my insurance, but they weren't. Then I called the second one, and they couldn't see me for like weeks and weeks. So then I called the third one, and they could see me later that week, and they were on my insurance. So I went to go see this physical therapist, and I go into his office, and I'm sitting down on the chair in the little medical cube, and he's writing. He's not really looking at me. He's like sitting there with his little pad and paper, and he's writing. So how did you get this? How did you sustain these injuries? When did this occur? And so I told him it was last Thursday, and I was driving down the street, and I was in this terrible car accident, and I was T-boned. He stops writing. He looks up, and he says to me, "Were you driving a silver minivan?" I said, "What?" "Yes, I was driving a silver minivan." He said, "I was there. I saw the whole thing." And I'm like, I couldn't believe that someone would be in an accident like that and they would survive. And I said to him, "Oh my gosh, I called 2 other physical therapists before I got to you. I know I'm with the right one. I know you're going to take good care of me." So he did. So I went to go see him every week for I think it was 2 to 3 times a week for the next 6 to 8 weeks. And he got me all healed, and everything was great. I'm like, God sent that physical therapist to watch my accident and take care of me. It was just an incredible thing, incredible story.
Oh my gosh, these stories, they just keep getting better. And I guess things get thrown at you. Is that a little pattern? You got a golf ball, you got a car, and it's just leading you in all these directions. But those are really cute stories. But I know you have a really freaky story that happened to you, something about a cell phone or something. So, and prayer. So I'd love to hear about that. I know everyone would enjoy that.
Yeah. So, all this time that these things were happening to me, I kind of just thought they were interesting coincidences, you know, interesting things that just happened, that they weren't planned. I kind of had an inkling that God was involved, but I wasn't at that point in my life where I was thinking that God sort of controls all the things that happen, and we're kind of like these puppets on a string here, and things are happening. So this story is called the cell phone story. And I live in a place that's pretty hot, and if you want to take a morning walk, you got to go early in the morning. So I went for a morning walk around 5 o'clock in the morning, and I had one of my little kids on one of those front packs. So his little legs were dangling out the pack, and it was early, 5:30. I was taking a walk, and there was not many people out since it was so early. But as I kept walking, I passed by this one house, and this elderly couple came out of their garage in their car, and they kind of waved at me. And, because my little baby looked cute in the pack. And so they waved at me, and I waved back, and I kept walking, and they kept driving. And then all of a sudden I look in the distance, and they had gotten into a car accident. And it was early in the morning, like no one was out, no cars were out. Like, how did this happen? So I thought to myself, I need a cell phone, but I wasn't carrying my cell phone in the morning, because I was just going for a walk with my baby. And so I said to myself, God, I need a cell phone. How am I going to get a cell phone? I need a cell phone right now. I need to call 911. I need a cell phone. And I was just like saying that in my mind, but sort of saying it out loud, but saying it in my mind with like this really intense feeling. I need a cell phone. So then I thought there was a guy across the street walking his dog. And I tried to shout at him, "Do you have a cell phone?" but he couldn't hear me. So then I decided, you know what, I'm going to go knock at a door, even though it's like by now like 5:45 in the morning. Like, I'm going to knock at the door. And I saw a house and it had these black gates in front of it. And I said, you know, that house looks like kind of ominous. I'm not going to knock on their door. So I went to the next house and I said to myself, I'm just going to knock on the door. I know it's early. And this was all happening like within 30 seconds. This was like really fast, right? And so I knock on the door and I go, knock, knock. And then I turn around, and on her front patio, I'm not joking, was a cell phone sitting on the ledge of her front patio. I pick up the cell phone. It was in these days with flip phones. Okay. I unflip the phone. I dial 911. I'm calling. I'm calling to report this car accident down the way. Can you come just to check everybody's okay? And as I'm talking on the phone, the door opens and the lady comes out and she's like wearing, like, her hair is like all messed up and she's wearing her like shorts and a t-shirt. She's like, just got out of bed. And I'm like, I'm like, there was a cell phone like on your front patio, but there was this accident and I rang the bell. I didn't know what to do. And she's like, she looks at me and I hang up the phone and she looks at me. She's like, what are you talking about? What's my cell phone doing out on the front patio? What? And so I said, I don't know what your cell phone's doing out on the front patio, but I needed it. There's this car accident and there it was. So I just used it. And so we were just like, we couldn't believe it. And so she gave me a drink of water and I started walking towards to the place where this elderly couple was. It turns out that they were fine. It was just a little fender bender. But as I walked home to my husband, I realized, oh my gosh. And I'm like getting goosebumps right now, even thinking about it. I prayed. I asked for something and it was like instant. I asked God. I mean, I didn't say, God, give me a cell phone. I said, I need a cell phone. And I was like really passionate about it. And there was a cell phone. So it's like the power of our prayer, the power of our intentions, the power of, if we really visualize what we need and we want, and we really, 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 really want it, sometimes God will say yes. I mean, I've heard one statistic that usually 80% of the time he's going to give you what you want if you really, 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 really ask for it intentionally and with good, character traits and such. About 20% of the time it's going to be no, and that's because it's not good for you. So that was the cell phone story. And as I walked home, I was actually white, and my husband said to me, "What happened to you?" And I told him the whole thing. And we realized the magnitude of this. And I realized that was at that point, I said, you know what? I got to stop. I got to reflect. I got to think about all these things that have happened to me. This golf ball that hits me, that's one out of a gazillion. It's clearly from God. The physical therapist showing up at my accident, it's clearly, it was meant to be. And then the wrong number of people that came and helped my mother-in-law. I realized, God is looking out for us. God is planning our lives. And this thing called coincidence, which is kind of a thing that you just think, oh, it's just a coincidence that happened. I looked it up and I realized in our faith, in Judaism, in life, in the Hebrew language, there's no such word as coincidence. There's only this thing called hashgacha pratis, which means divine supervision. And so I realized, no, these are not stories of coincidence. These are stories of divine intervention, stories of God's providence over me. And it's a two-way street. I can ask and he can deliver, or I didn't ask, but he can do what's right for me. And so that's when I really got serious about listening and watching the things that were happening in my life and other people's lives. So people started sending me their stories. And so in some of the other books that I've written, I collected stories from other people that were just amazing as well.
Robin, sorry, sometimes it takes me a little time to get off mute. I love how you keep saying coincidence, because my favorite quote is by Albert Einstein. And I love it because it's a mix of spirituality and science, because he's a man of science and mathematics. And it's, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous.
Ooh.
I love that. And that seems like you, of all people, have had that. But I do think if we all keep a diary or keep notes, that we'll all realize just so many coincidences, how things just tend to fall into place. Things that we might want to happen won't, but a lot of things that we want to happen by coincidence or prayer or just being at the right place in the right time. Things like that can happen. Do you have any comments about that? Otherwise, I have another
Yeah, I
question.
do. You know, when I give these talks to people, I ask them, you know, I share a few of my stories and then I ask them to share some of their stories. And always in the audience, always people will say, oh, well, I had this great story. You want to hear it? Always people have stories that they want to share with me about a prayer that they did and it came true, or a coincidence, hashgacha pratis that happened to them that was just amazing. So we all have it. You don't have to be different or, you know, strange or unusual or whatever. We all have this ability to pray. We all have this ability to have divine intervention in our lives. It's just a matter of looking out for it and getting in tune. It's like a radio dial, you know, like in the olden days, there were radio stations and you had to kind of twist the knob and to get the right frequency so that you could actually hear the station. You know, we don't have radios anymore, but that's how it is. If you just turn your personal knob to the frequency, you can tune in to the messages that God is sending us. And you sometimes have to get quiet and you sometimes have to turn off your phone or turn off the news or turn off the social media, because all those extra messages bombard us and they clutter the true nice messages, the true messages that God's trying to send to us.
Beautiful. I love that. So those have all been really great stories, but can you give me the biggest story ever? For example, how do we really know that a divine creator, something we don't understand or see, is involved in our lives, and that there is reward and punishment for our actions? Tell us the power of prayer, Mishnah, explain what Mishnah study is, and the tzedakah story.
Sure. So this is a woo-woo story, but it's a true story. And this happened about 11 years ago. And I had called my Aunt Myra just to say hi and how are you doing? And she said, are you calling because you heard the news? And I said, what news? And she said that her husband had passed away that morning. And I didn't know. I had just called to say hi. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. He was in almost 80 years old. And I said, I'm sorry for your loss. When's the funeral going to be? I'll fly out. And she said, you know, we're not really religious. We're not really into burial. We're just, everybody here just does these cremations. It's quick, it's easy. And I'm like, no, no, it's not quick. It's not easy. It's not at all. But I was like in shock and she was in shock. So she had just picked up the phone. So I hung up and I said, before I hung up, I said, you got to bury my uncle. You got to bury your husband. So I called my cousins and they were crying and everyone was distraught and they didn't know what to do. And so I said, look, let me help you. But they weren't sure of the process. They'd never lost a loved one before. And one cousin lived in one state, another lived in another state, another lived in another state. So it was very confusing and very, very emotional situation. So I said, let me help. So I called the cemetery, I called the funeral home, and I said, look, I'm a niece. I don't have any authority to do anything, but if they change their mind, can you take care of the burial and everything? And they said, sure, she'll just have to sign some papers. So I called my cousin again and I said, can you please sign, the papers? Would you do this? And she wasn't sure. So I started praying. I just prayed, and I remembered that cell phone that had appeared for me. And I just prayed and prayed, please let my uncle have a proper, gentle, loving burial, a place that we can visit, a place that's gentle and respectful to his, because he was in the Navy, like he was a soldier. Let's give him the respect that he deserves. And I was praying and praying and praying. And then I kept calling my cousins. And then I decided, my prayers, I'm trying my best with my prayers, but let me give some charity, or the Hebrew word for that is tzedakah. And because that's supposed to add to the power of your prayers is if you give some tzedakah. It's customary to do so. So I gave $180, and because 18 is the equivalent of, you can rearrange the letters for in Hebrew letters, and 18 means life. So I did times 10 and gave $180 to this organization. that studies what's called Mishnah. Now, Mishnah is part of the Jewish Bible. And if you rearrange the letters of Mishnah, you get the word neshama, and neshama means soul. And so it's customary to study these special paragraphs in the Mishnah because it gives comfort to the soul. So I gave this $180 in tzedakah and charity to this organization to study these special Bible passages for my uncle's soul. And then the most amazing thing happened. I kept calling my cousin, and she finally said, I agree. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the burial. Now, keep in mind, my uncle had already been just lying in this refrigerator for 2 weeks. So she signs the paper. She calls the organization, the cemetery and the mortuary, and they come get her dad out of the crematorium, and they bring him to a Jewish funeral home. And they start saying prayers for him, and she lights a candle, and she feels at peace. And then I fly into Las Vegas to the funeral. And at the funeral, at the cemetery, my Aunt Myra says to me, Robin, this is your calling. God is going to repay you. Thank you so much. And I'm like, what? That's like such a weird thing to say at a funeral. And I said, oh, okay. So then after the funeral and everybody's, hungry, and usually you go back to a home and you sit down and you eat a little meal. It's called a mourner's meal. But in this case, we went to a kosher restaurant in Las Vegas, and we were sitting down with my cousin and my aunt. And I said, Valerie, what changed your mind? How did you go from not knowing what to do to doing the burial? What changed your mind? And she said, I had a dream. I'm like, what do you mean you had a dream? She said, I had a dream, and my dad came to me in this dream, and he said, get me out of here. And I'm like, whoa, that's intense. When was that? And she said, it was on Tuesday. I said, which Tuesday? She said, just this past Tuesday. I'm like, oh my gosh, I gave tzedakah on Tuesday morning, and you had a dream on Tuesday night. And then I explained to her that the tzedakah, the charity dollars that I gave, the $180, was to bring comfort to his soul. And so he must have then, I don't know, he must have felt this spiritual thing and come to you in a dream to say, get me out of here. So she starts crying, and I'm crying, crying in the restaurant, because we realized the magnitude of what had just happened. But it gets more wild after this. So remember, my aunt said to me at the cemetery, she said, this is your calling and God is going to repay you. So a few months later, I was 44 at the time. I was taking a road trip, about to get in the car to take a road trip with my family to Colorado. And it's about a 14-hour car drive. And I'm about to get in the car, the kids are like, come on, let's go. I'm packing up and everything. I'm like, I don't feel so good. I feel like a little nauseous. So I said to my husband, I think I need to take a pregnancy test. He's like, what? So I take this test. I mean, we had no baby things in the house. My youngest was 6. So I take this test and I look at it, and it's pink. And I show it to my husband, and he's like, oh my gosh, he's jumping up and down. He's so excited. And I'm like, are you crazy? I'm going to have a baby at 45? What? But then I get in the car, and I'm in stunned silence. And my husband is just driving, and the kids are chatting in the background and whatever. And I'm just counting on my fingers. Oh, when is this baby going to be due? And I, count on my fingers, and I'm like, and then it whooshes through my mind. This is your calling. God is going to repay you. Well, my Aunt Myra had said I was due to have this child on the anniversary of my uncle dying. And it was as clear as day in my mind. And there's this concept in Judaism that there's measure for measure, you do something and you get rewarded. And I was like, whoa. Now, I went to the doctor a few months later, a few weeks later, and I was nervous, and they said everything's fine. Then a few months later, I go to the doctor, and we find out it's a boy. And so I call my cousins from the ultrasound room, and I tell them, and they're excited, and I tell them I'm going to name him after your dad. And so everybody's happy in this sad year. And then the baby's not coming. I'm supposed to have this baby, right? Now, remember, my uncle was in the crematorium for 2 weeks. So I was 2 weeks late. I had my son on the exact day my uncle died. It's called the yard site, the anniversary. I had him on the exact day 1 year later. Now, if that's not like an open miracle, I don't know what is, right? So it's the power of prayer. It's the power of giving charity dollars, tzedakah. It's the power of Mishnah. It's the concept of measure for measure, reward and punishment, because there was a reward. I mean, I look at my son every day. He's like worth $1 gazillion, like, oh my gosh, I could never ask for anything better. It's just so incredible. I mean, the odds of getting pregnant at my age also was like 0%, right? So, all these stories, they just show that it's a beautiful thing. They show a beautiful thing. They show that don't worry, God's got your back, right? He's got your back. Don't worry. Just have faith. Just pray. Give some charity because it's good. It's good extra measure, and know that everything really will turn out for the best.
I think you answered it, Robin. Oh, what an incredible story. Oh my gosh, so impactful, so powerful. Whew. So my question was going to be, how do we apply this to our lives? But I think you answered it. Do you have more to say about that? Because then I have another question about another story.
Yeah, even if you don't know how to pray, you know how to talk to someone, right? So just talk. Just pretend that God is your father or your brother or just a friend, and just use real words. Just use English. You don't, if you don't know Hebrew, that's fine. Use Spanish, French, whatever. It doesn't matter. God knows all languages, and just talk. And then if you want, you can start learning formal prayers, but just start out with talking and talk all the time. Like, when you're washing dishes or when you're driving the car or when you're, watching a game or whatever it is, or you want to get a deal for some business deal that you're working on, just pray. Yeah, why not? Because it helps. We have this relationship. God wants to give us everything. God wants to give us $1 billion. God loves us. God is not this angry thing, this angry being. It's not like sledgehammer Judaism. God loves us. God loves all people. So the point is, pray, talk to God anytime, all the time. I sit at my dishes and I'm talking to God. And give charity, because all the money that we have comes from God. So we know, yes, we work for it, and we but yeah, where does it come from? It really ultimately comes from God. So give it away, give part of it away. That's there are commandments that say give 10%. If you can give more, great, give more than 10%. I try and give close to 20%. You have to check your numbers, check your spreadsheets, but it's good to give charity, because those are the things that you keep with you, right? Not the car, not the house, not the fancy furniture, the big screen TV, but the money that you give away to do good deeds, that just fills your heart, right? It fills your spiritual bank account, right? You can have a bank account full of millions of dollars, but when you fill up your spiritual bank account, that's what you're going to take with you to the afterlife forever and ever and ever and ever. This world is only, if you're lucky, 70, 80, 90 years, 120 years, if you're lucky, right? So the spiritual life that you're going to have is for eternity. And that's when you pray, and when you give this charity dollars, when you study, all these types of things, that's how you can apply it to your life.
Thank you. I love that, Robin. So I want to take a very quick pause before the next story and ask, what do you do and how can you help people when they reach out to you? They can obviously ask you about coincidence and miracle stories, but how else can you help people and how can they reach out to you? And I'll put it in the comments as well.
Sure. So because of the amazing personal miracle that happened in my life with my son, I volunteer for an organization called the National Association of Hever Kadishas. It's a Jewish burial society. And so I help people in crisis situations or before crisis of when someone dies. I help them choose burial. I tell them what resources are available. I help them understand what happens to the body, what happens to the soul. And I comfort people through this process. And I take 24/6. I'm available by phone, email, whatever. I have cases all over the world that I take care of. Last week, I had a case in Aruba. I had a case in Philadelphia. So I help people when they're in this situation and they don't know what to do. And helping them with the fundraising, helping them with where to go and what to do, the whole process. And so that's one thing that I do to help people. And then also because of the spiritual work that I did on myself in this whole experience, I speak at, on Zoom all over the place, in person. And I have my books, but I also do life coaching, and I work with an organization out of Jerusalem in the background here. And I work with a team of people, and we provide life coaching. So, and it's on all different topics. It's on marriage, on parenting, on overcoming stress and anxiety, on personal growth. Right now, we're working on a program for making your new goals for the upcoming new Jewish New Year. And that series of classes is coming up soon in the middle of August 11th. And those series of classes, I help people with coaching them on how to make a plan for their life. And just the whole goal is to live with more joy and vitality. We're here, so let's have fun, let's have life balance, let's have joy, let's have happiness and faith and emunah. That's the Hebrew word for faith and happiness. So I do that kind of life coaching through that institute, and also directly with people if they would like.
And how can people reach out to you? You're reminding me that I went through that program for anxiety, because that's why I forgot to mention, that's why I do these videos and interviews with spiritual people like you who have an incredible story to tell, because it really helped me when I was going through a hard time, almost 2 years of anxiety, waking up every morning feeling doom and gloom. So I went through your program, and it was so helpful. There were, I think, 20 skills I learned from it. So how do we reach out for you for that program and your just general life coaching? And that's my question for now, but I have another question about it.
Sure. So if anybody's interested in taking one of these courses, they can call me, and my cell phone is 602-469-1606. And the website is newchhabura.com, newhabura.com. But the best way really is to call or text me or WhatsApp me. And then I'll send you all the details about the courses so that you could take them. And yeah, that overcoming stress and anxiety course was great. I mean, just so many techniques, very practical tools. I mean, it's a Jewish organization. However, it doesn't mean it's not practical, It's Jewish based, Torah based, but it's very practical tools that are applicable to people of all walks of life.
Wonderful. And I should mention too, if you want to reach out to me, I do hypnotherapy, because that's something that helped me with my anxiety, and stories like yours, and also nutrition. As I had to do some, if people have questions, I can explain what helped me nutritionally too. That helped me tremendously as well. So my email is growthfactor.org@gmail.com. And I have a question about, and I'll put that in the comments as well. Now, a lot of people don't know the word Shabbat or Shabbos. Most people around the world call it the Sabbath. What I realize probably in the last 5 years, more and more, now that most of us have a smartphone, we feel very addicted to it. I know I do. It's hard to get away from, and I feel so good when I get away from it. But there's some higher power that told us you need to take a night off and a day off, and that's called the Sabbath or Shabbat or Shabbos, which typically is sunset on Friday night until sundown again on Saturday night. And you're meant to be with your community and walk around and not drive and not work, not exchange money, and just have a meal and stop and slow down. And I think the whole world would appreciate that. And not everyone knows about the Shabbos or the Sabbath or Shabbat, as we call it. So I would love to hear your story on the Shabbos dance.
Okay, this is a cute little story. And I think this is the one we're probably going to end with. So Shabbat is for everybody in the sense that God, there's 7 days in the week, right? It's not like there's not 5 days in the week. So originally the way the world was designed was that mankind was supposed to work 6 days and then rest on the 7th day. It's just a good idea. So, and like you said, it's a good idea to put the phone away and put the TV away. And you feel so good. You really do feel good. And God created the world in 6 days and rested. So we want to emulate him. So this story is called the Shabbos pants, or the Shabbat pants. Sometimes we like to get away from our home and go on a little vacation to different places, different cities. And we went to Palo Alto a few years ago in Northern California. and we were staying, someone said, you can just use our house. You know, we're going out of town, you can use our house. And I'm like, wow, great, awesome. So we used their house for Shabbat, and we brought our food and we brought our clothes, and we set up ourselves in the guest room area. And I put my son in the bath. He was 9 at the time. And he's in the bath getting ready and everything. And he's very particular about how he dresses. Okay, he's only 9. At the time, he was only 9, but he's very particular. So he's about to get out. And I said to him, Rory, I looked in the suitcase. I have your shirt and your jacket and your little tie and your socks. But mommy forgot your Shabbos pants. I totally forgot his pants. And I knew he would be devastated because like he has to like look together. Like he just got to look cool at 9 years old. So he's like, I'm not getting out of the bath. I'm staying in the bath, Mom. I'm not getting out. I'm not doing Shabbat. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I went back into the room and I started rummaging through the suitcase again. And then I'm at someone else's house, right? So I thought to myself, they must have kids. And I thought, maybe I could look in their drawers. I thought, oh no, I can't do that. But it went in my mind, right? Maybe I can go look in their closet, because I knew this was going to be a disaster because my son would not get out of the bath. So then I saw in the guest room, there was a little sign above their little chest cabinet, and it said, welcome to our home. We're delighted to have you. If there's anything that you need, just ask. So I said, God, I need some Shabbos pants. At that moment, the doorbell rings. And we're like, this is not my house. So I hear my husband, walking towards the front door, and I hear him opening the door, and I hear this little voice, and this little voice says, oh, hi, this is really my house, but I know you guys are staying in here, but I just want to get something from my room. And I run out to the front entry, and I don't grab, but I say, how old are you? Who are you? And he says, I'm so-and-so Felsen, and I live in this house, and I just kind of want to get something from my room. Is that okay? I'm like, sure. How old are you? And he goes, I'm 10. And I said, well, my son's 9, and he's in the bath, and we forgot our pants. And he immediately understood what I was talking about. He ran to his room, and he ran back, and he had 2 pairs of pants. Now, this little boy is he was like a husky boy, like he was a bigger boned boy. And my little boy is very like thin, petite boy. And so I came back to the room with the bathroom, and I came into the bathroom, opened the door, and I said, Rory, Mommy forgot your pants, but please forgive me. God made a miracle, and I have 2 pairs of pants for you. And I showed him the pants. He gets out of the bathtub. He looks at him and he goes, okay, I'll try them. And I'm praying, please, God, let them fit. And he puts them on, and it's a miracle. They fit. So our Shabbat was totally saved because, this would have been like a major disaster. So that's the story of the Shabbat pants. And I wrote a letter to the owner of the house, and I set it in the mailbox, thanking them for their hospitality, even though they weren't home, and thanking them for the incredible miracle of the Shabbat pants that happened as a result of their son.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. I think what you're so good at is collecting these stories and remembering them. Maybe you write them down, because I know there's so many of us that must have these incredible experiences, and either we didn't notice or we didn't write it down, or maybe there are people like you that just take note of it and you can share, because it's amazing. Thank you, Robin. This has been so fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been fun to do this, share these stories with you. It's such a meaningful thing that you're doing to get the word out about God consciousness and all these special stories. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, it was so great. Thank you, Robin. Is there anything else you want to say? I think we reached everything. We know what you do. We know about your books, lots of wonderful stories. People can reach you. We talked about coincidences, and anything else you want to cover?
Yeah, I would just end by saying that, live the best, happiest life you can by, talking to God when you can, whenever. It doesn't matter what words you use, and give charity, and write down your stories. Just, you don't have to edit them. Just write them down. I started out with a little notebook and a pencil, and you never know where it's going to lead you, because I started out writing it in pencil, and fast forward 23 years, I'm doing Zooms on with you.
Thank you, Robin. And thank you to everyone who's listening. I hope you had as much fun as I did. And I can see Robin did too. So hope everyone enjoyed and was inspired, and that you also will start to notice, or you probably already do, all the coincidences in your life. And we know it's something very divine. Bye, everyone. And thank you, Robin. Bye, Robin.
Bye. Thank you.